The Defenders has arrived on Netflix, and while it was great finally getting to binge Marvel's Netflix superhero crossover, the show raised as many questions as it answered. Here are the 7 biggest WTF questions we have about the Defenders. The season ended with Danny Rand honoring Matt's final request to defend New York City in his absence. But what will that entail exactly? Will Iron Fist become the city's preeminent hero, or is Danny intent on literally becoming the new Daredevil? That may sound silly, but there is a comic book precedent for Danny taking over the Daredevil mantle while Matt is incapacitated. And you could argue that Daredevil has more symbolic importance to the residents of Hell's Kitchen than relative no-name Iron Fist. Given the fairly widespread backlash to Iron Fist Season 1, maybe Marvel is better off giving Danny a new costume identity, for now. Now, we don't blame the Defenders for assuming Daredevil is dead, and in fact, viewers are still waiting to find out how Matt survived having a building crash down on top of him. Sure, Matt can take a beating, but there's a difference between the Kingpin's fists and thousands of tons of rubble. It is possible the dragon skeleton supported the chamber so it didn't fully collapse, but even then, how did Matt manage to crawl all the way to that convent? Obviously, the real reason is that Marvel isn't going to kill off its most popular Netflix hero before he's even had a chance to fight Bullseye. We assume these questions will be addressed when Daredevil Season 3 finally rolls around, but until then, we can't help but wonder how Matt cheated death this time. Danny Rand's nemesis, Bakudo, was killed in Season 1 of Iron Fist, but thanks to the Hand, he was brought back to help carry out their plans at Midland Circle. The problem is that the timing of Bakudo's resurrection simply doesn't add up. Here's what we know. Elektra was resurrected at the end of Season 2 of Daredevil, whereas Bakudo was killed at the end of Season 1 of Iron Fist, which takes place months later. But in the Defenders, the other fingers of the Hand resent Alexandra for using the last of the resurrection elixir to revive Elektra. So how did they bring back Bakudo if there was no elixir left? It's possible there's an explanation. Maybe the fingers have their own stashes of elixir they're not telling each other about. But more likely, it's just a continuity flub. Marvel may have had an idea of how the 4 solo shows would lead into the Defenders, but we don't think it was a very detailed roadmap early on. Sigourney Weaver was a major get for this series, bringing an extra touch of star power to the big Defenders team-up. And while Weaver didn't disappoint as Hand leader Alexandra Reed, it was surprising to see her abruptly written out of the picture before the final showdown. Sure, it was a clever misdirect, but why cast someone of Weaver's talent in a role that's only a means to an end? In many ways, Alexandra's unceremonious departure highlights a growing problem with Netflix's Marvel series and their villains. These shows have been home to some of the best villains in the MCU, but more and more often there's a sense that the best villains aren't being used to their full potential. Luke Cage Season 1 had the same problem when Cottonmouth was killed off and replaced by the far less memorable Diamondback. It's too bad these shows can't recognize when they have a good thing going. The final episode did a real number on the Hand's leadership. It certainly looked like Murakami died in the final implosion, but what about the ever-present Madame Gao? She was last seen seconds before the timer counted down, telling Murakami that the end had arrived and then vanishing. Did she somehow escape? Will she be back to rebuild the Hand, or is she finally finished? We'll probably get the answer sooner or later in a future Netflix series. That said, it seems like a lot of fans are pretty sick of ninjas at this point, and we wouldn't blame Marvel for keeping Gao and the Hand off the table for a while. At the end of Iron Fist Season 1, Danny Rand returns to Kunlun only to find it's been destroyed by the Hand. However, Alexandra later explains that she and her fellow Hand members want nothing more than to return to Kunlun, and cryptically tells Danny he only saw what he wanted to see. In the comics, Kunlun is a mystical city that has a habit of disappearing and reappearing, so perhaps the city went away in order to prevent a Hand invasion, meaning Danny could one day return to his adopted home in a future series. The Defenders continued the Marvel Netflix tradition of only obliquely referencing the MCU movies. As for a full-fledged team-up between the Defenders and the Avengers, don't hold your breath. We understand there are various behind-the-scenes reasons why there isn't more interplay between the MCU films and TV series. They may all exist in the same universe, but that connection is usually a one-way street. The shows reflect the big developments of the movies, but the movies largely ignore the shows. Plus, it's not exactly easy to bring in big actors like Robert Downey Jr. or Chris Evans for a quick cameo. With this lack of any true crossover, the Avengers are starting to become very conspicuous in their absence. The bigger the scope of the Netflix series, the more bizarre it is that heroes like Spider-Man and Doctor Strange don't seem to notice all those ninja battles and building implosions. Going forward, these shows may need to find a more elegant way of explaining why the Defenders seem to exist in their own little bubble. And while we're talking about other Marvel heroes, the Punisher's upcoming show better explain why he didn't show up to help the Defenders take down the Hand. Those are all the moments that have us scratching our heads. Let us know your biggest Defenders questions in the comments. Plus, make sure to watch our videos breaking down all the Easter eggs in the show and explaining how the ending sets up the future of the Marvel Netflix shows. And don't forget to like and subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch.